You're listening to the Alleluia podcast, where faith and animation collide. Each episode will discuss the various topics in animated movies and TV shows, while also sharing our thoughts and opinions as they relate to faith and spirituality. Get ready to raise a hallelujah. It's time for Alleluia.
And you're locked into another episode of the Anothe podcast. My name is Josh, and on a Saturday morning at the time of this recording, and eating some good old banana nut oatmeal that my wife has graciously made. My wife, Rebecca.
Good morning, everyone.
And they're watching this on the video version. This really looks really tasty, but I'm probably going to forget about it, and it's going to get cold. We have to reheat it up.
It's okay.
But yeah, it is November, guys, and so that means that holidays are just around the corner with Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, all that great stuff. And we just came back from our Cringe-tober series, so hope you guys enjoyed suffering with us of the worst of Christian animated movies. Again, they meant well, had good intentions. They focused more on proselytizing, which is not bad, but they kind of glossed over content. They made that secondary.
Right. Yep. It's unfortunate, but
like there are things that did it well. VeggieTales does it well. A couple others that I can't think of, and that's why there hasn't been many good Christian animated movies, which is probably why we don't talk about them on the podcast very much.
Yeah.
So that's why we dedicated a whole month to it.
That's right.
Well, we have the honor of having a guest with us. I know I say this like almost every month, but this is the season of the guests, and we're very happy to have them with us. Rebecca, go ahead and do the honors of introducing our guest today.
Yeah, so today we actually have a university lecturer in the UK, and she's also an author for Beneath the Tangles. Welcome, Claire.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
And I forget to unmute myself. Yes, Claire, we're very happy to have you here, and we're excited to talk about the anime series that we'll be talking about for this episode. But we want to jump right into the interview to give our listeners an opportunity to get to know you. So we're going to go ahead and have Rebecca ask you a few questions, and also dive into a little bit about what Beneath the Tangles is. We have kind of talked about it briefly in the past episodes, but I've never really delved into what is Beneath the Tangles, how did it start, and all that great stuff. So Rebecca, go ahead and proceed with our interview.
Yeah. So first off, excuse me. First off, we wanted our listeners just to get to know you a little bit better, kind of like Josh said. So we'd love to hear a little bit about your background, how you grew up, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Canada, and I had sort of a combination of your typical kind of city girl upbringing and then a dash of Huckleberry Finn. We sort of moved to the countryside when I was about 12, and then we started moving around all different places. I lived in Newfoundland for a while as well. So I had a very adventure-filled youth, as it were. And part of that was also going to different churches. So it had a very kind of ecumenical upbringing in the church. My parents were divorced when I was quite young, and my mom started going to church when I was about 7. So that's when we started exploring faith and the body of Christ. And eventually my mom married my stepfather, who was a pastor. And so that's when we started kind of moving around. So I've gotten the kind of the inside look at the, at the church, outside look. I continued exploring then when I left home to go to university. And I feel like I've gone to pretty much every denomination, and it's been a real exciting adventure too, to just see, to kind of grow in appreciation for the diversity in the body of Christ. And that really has, I think, fed into a lot of my own teaching, my profession, and also my work at Beneath the Tangles, is this real appreciation for just how active God is, how creative he is, and just how he has such a skill and such a desire to create connection, create bridges, and bring people together. That's been kind of a constant theme, I would say. Anything else that would be interesting? I guess you could say about when I was a kid, when I was growing up, it was sort of a three-way tie as to what profession I wanted to go in. And that was either veterinarian, missionary, or a cartoonist. And I currently do none of those things. And yet, in a way, all three of them, sort of play out in my life. So it's cool. I love how God weaves things together. But I'm sure we'll pick up on that as we go.
Yeah, so interesting. Even hearing your story and then the series that we're going to be talking about today, I'm like, oh wow, that ties in a lot with I'm sure we'll be talking about. So that's really interesting. So you said you're a university lecturer. What do you lecture on?
So my specialty is Stalin era Russian culture, particularly looking at visual culture, so cinema, propaganda posters, artwork, this kind of thing. But I teach the sort of political history, cultural history, a little bit of translation from Russian into English as well. So it's all kind of in there. So studying cultures very much different from my own culture, as it were. Both for work and then for pleasure with Beneath the Tangles.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, yeah, that's so interesting that I think those who've been long listeners, they'll know that I actually went to study in the UK for my master's program, and it was in art history and visual culture. So it's interesting that you study or focus mostly on Stalin era Russia visual culture that they had at the time.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's a big reason why I ended up. I should have said I'm in the UK. And I know how I ended up over here is this was really the place to come to study sort of Russian cinema, Soviet cinema, that kind of thing. So yeah, so the visual culture brought us both across the ocean.
There we go. Like you were saying, those connections that God likes to make. I continue to be amazed, honestly, when we meet people through the podcast. That I'm like, wow, that's who knew that was a connection beyond just that we both love anime or animation in general. Yeah, it's awesome. So, so you're a writer for Beneath the Tangles, which is a website that's focused on anime in the context of Christianity. So, tell us a little bit about how you got involved with them.
Yeah, sure. Well, the website itself, the ministry as a whole, started about 12 years ago. But I was completely oblivious to the existence of anime 12 years ago. So I'm actually more of a recent member of the team. I just joined about a year and a half ago. I just started watching anime maybe not even quite 3 years ago, actually. But throughout my life, I'd always noticed that God would speak so powerfully to me very often through pop culture or through mainstream culture, through initially when I was younger, through music. And then as I was older and at university and got more interested in film studies, he was speaking to me so powerfully through cinema. Films like Run, Lola, Run and Memento, these not the kinds of films you associate with Christianity. And yet, they were speaking deeply to my heart. And then that expanded into television and science fiction, which is sort of lifelong passions of mine. So when I started watching anime, I was maybe 3 or 4 series into this little experiment when wham, Holy Spirit just sort of hit me, and I was learning life lessons. I was learning faith lessons from what I was seeing, and so I started writing, just as I had been writing my whole life about these things that God was revealing to me or challenging me about, or directing me through. Throughout my life, through music and film and television, I started doing the same for anime. And I just happened across Beneath the Tangles at one point, and I thought, oh, I need to maybe think about doing something with this little book of essays I have building up now. So just kind of, one thing led to another, and I sent out an inquiry email, and Charles, who's known as Tweak online, said, yes, we'll print it. Do you have anything else? And then eventually I joined the team sort of within a couple of weeks of that. So, yeah.
That's so cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I think for Christians who love anime, they've probably come across Beneath the Tangles before if they've done a little bit of digging. We actually, they were an inspiration for the podcast. This was all Josh's idea, by the way. He was the one who really wanted to do this, and then he pulled me along into it, which has been a wonderful journey.
Yeah, originally it like Rebecca wasn't even gonna be like part of the podcast. I just had her do like some graphics and the logo and everything. And then I remember it's like, well, she has a great like narration voice, and so I brought her in as the co-host and all that. But yeah, getting that to Beneath the Tangles, I had like followed their website, their blog for a bit, and I'm like, well, I don't want to do the same thing that they do, so let's broaden it a bit and like let's just open it to all types of animation. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty great. And yeah, I remember having conversation. It was like, wow, where I was, because I was asking Josh at some point, I was like, where do you see like this podcast going? Who would you want to work with? Who would you want to partner with? That kind of thing. He was like, oh, it would be really cool if we could partner with Beneath the Tangles since we're so similar in what we're doing and our goals. And and then it was really cool when Charles reached out and was like, hey, we'd love to send some authors your way and collab basically. And we were like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's
we're super
wonderful.
excited.
Yeah. Just in the last few months, we've really sort of just been nailing down what exactly our mission and vision for the ministry are, because this changes over time. Obviously, Charles has been doing this for quite a long time, but the context that you're doing it in shifts. Anime is much more mainstream now than it was when we started 12 years ago. I mean, Netflix, suddenly now is like filled with anime. This wasn't the case even just 3 or 4 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I see this in my classes. Like my students are all familiar with anime and the tropes of manga and these kinds of things. And so I think it has really focused the mission onto community building for us. Both for Christians who engage with anime and manga and light novels, a kind of otaku culture, but also to begin to bridge out into making a kind of community where we ask deep questions about life, about how to do life, about how to be heroes, as it were, which is like the core theme of like 90% of anime, right? And to create this kind of space for discussion and for asking questions rather than necessarily preaching answers, but actually engaging with these questions in thoughtful and also Christ-like ways, to build a kind of community within the broader global, otaku and anime culture that is also representing Christ, and sort of, bringing Christian spirituality into it, because it is in there, that a lot of Japanese creatives, a lot of, some of the, quite a number of their sort of Nobel Prize winning literati are fascinated by Christianity. And so it's constantly coming up. So we feel like that's a kind of an opportunity there to engage with some of their engagement as well,
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, it is interesting. Throughout a lot of anime, there is a lot of Christian theme, even if it's not quite right or very wrong at times.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
take for instance a couple of ones that we've watched. Well, one we have watched, which is an older anime called Jesus and Buddha, which like they're roommates.
Oh, yeah.
And then theologically speaking, the devil is a part-timer. Very interesting.
Yeah,
You
that was
basically
interesting.
have Satan and Lucifer, which they made two separate characters, basically also roommates and being traveled from the demon realm into present day Japan.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, very interesting way. Well, and they
It's
have different
interesting.
concepts of like demons too, the way
They
that
do,
the
yeah.
Japanese think of
right.
them. It's not like we
And the
do.
terminology that is often translated as demon in English doesn't actually mean demon in Japanese, because they distinguish between several different terms. But often all of those different terms are just lumped into demon in English. But it's not really what they're talking about.
Yeah,
But it's
exactly.
interesting. I would say, like, as a writer, I tend to engage with and watch to completion series where I really feel like either I'm being wildly entertained and it's beautiful to look at and to listen to, or, more often because I feel like there's some nugget there. There's like some hidden treasure in this field that I am digging for. And then on the flip side, we have Charles, who he has such a heart for otaku culture and for young people, that he will painstakingly sit through series that he personally doesn't enjoy, but they're the popular ones right now, and he is like they're persevering through them to mine them so that he can engage with kind of not necessarily the gold in the series, but the missed opportunities, the poor decisions, those kinds of things. So we try to cover sort of both ends of the spectrum through this ministry. It's not just picking and choosing, oh, here's a nice Christian thing, let me pick that up, but also engaging with the more difficult, challenging stuff too that is uncomfortable, and that often I think, he comes under some flack for how can you watch this as a Christian? He's like, well, but I'm watching it specifically as a Christian because I want to engage with the viewers,
Right.
the viewership of this show or this series, this kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
I
that's,
I saw like a post where people were, coming against him a little bit because he was watching like Rent a Girlfriend, which it is a popular series right now. Not the best male protagonist. But again, we sometimes have to watch these things.
Yeah.
Not that we necessarily agree with it, but maybe we can find some, as you say, Claire, some missed opportunities, bridging that gap. And yeah, so I think that's very commendable.
Yeah, and I think I immediately, while you were talking about that, I immediately thought of Domestic Girlfriend, where it was like, it was so uncomfortable to watch, but it was like, but it's really interesting to see. This is how some some people think that this is okay, and why do they think that that's okay? Why is it not okay? Why is it very complicated? And so yeah, I thought that's really interesting. So it's very commendable that that's something that you guys all believe in and strive towards, because and we can have those conversations even with non-believers, and say, use them as examples. I mean, well, the stories that Jesus told, they weren't all happy endings, and they weren't all they were bad examples, some of them, like this is what not to do. And I think we can take from that.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's interesting is see often in the discussions on our Instagram account and this sort of thing is that non-Christian viewers will watch and they'll say, this makes me really uncomfortable, but I don't know why, because objectively isn't this just a different form of love or something like that? And they'll be really sort of questioning what some of the popular slogans of our culture are today. And I mean, if there aren't believers who have, like Peter told us, to always be ready to give a reason for the hope that is in you, always be prepared to sort of actually, explain the gospel or explain, why we hold certain views, certain world views, or these types of things. If there's nobody there waiting to do that, then the confusion just kind of continues, it percolates, and everyone just says, oh, well, shrug shoulders. It is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. That's so awesome. So moving away from Beneath the Tangles a little bit, which we can totally talk about more. I'm sure we will as we go through. What are some of your anime series? Like, what are some of your, we can pick, because I know it's super hard to pick like individual shows. What is your favorite? So what are the genres that you tend to go towards more, and individual shows if you have them?
Yeah. Well, thankfully, I had this question in advance, so I do have a list of individual shows. Because in fact, the genre question is even harder because I don't think there's a genre that I don't watch really. There are certain tags on series that I'm like, oh no, that's not going to be my kind of thing. But in general, I enjoy a diversity of genres. But I would say so. A couple of things. So anything that Naoko Yamada, who's this relatively young director. She was with Kyoto Animation, KyoAni. Now she's with, at Science Saru. She just does the most beautiful, thoughtful, just absolutely stunning, gorgeous works, mostly films. but she did a historical series that came out this time last year called The Heike Story. And it's an adaptation of a 12th century Japanese novel, one of the first novels in the world, really. That's my hands down favorite. It's got my favorite writer, collaborated with her, and also composer who did the score, Kensuke Ushio. And for me, the composer is like as influential as anything else, really, as the story or the director or the studio in deciding things. So I tend to follow Kensuke Ushio and Yuki Kajiura, who did the Madoka soundtrack, and a couple of other famous composers, like the guy who did Attack on Titan, So Wano. But a couple of other favorites, and again, you'll notice a kind of music theme. Ya Boy Kong Ming, which came out back in the spring. It's the most unexpected series from PA Works. They tend to do these really kind of slice of life, cute girls, kind of often rural series. And this was like urban. It was like he was doing rap. It's just absolutely fantastic. But both Charles and I wrote about this series quite a bit because there are a lot of sort of Christ-like parallels in this character. And then, a few others would be Vivi Fluorite Eye's Song, which was this really epic kind of science fiction series, again with beautiful animation and soundtrack. And I could go on, but probably 3 is good.
Yeah, that's a great list. We've started watching Your Boy Kong Ming, and it's really good.
Yeah, we
it's
really enjoy
good.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're excited to finish it up here fairly soon, actually, because I think we're going to be letting go of our High Dive subscription. Like the only reason we got it was for this show, actually.
Yeah,
so we need to finish that up
absolutely.
and then not have the whatever $8 a month or something.
Yeah. Well, while you're on there, watch season 1 of Non Biori as well. I think it's the greatest slice of life series that's ever been made. Season 1 is on High Dive. Season 3 is on Crunchyroll. Season 2 has just disappeared from the ether during the whole Funimation Crunchyroll thing.
Right.
So to get it on DVD.
Yeah, with the whole merger between Funimation and Crunchyroll, there are some things that come over. It's like, hey, we had this. We still don't have the dub, even though we're now merged, but that'll be coming. So, but for those who don't want to read, we want it. But yeah, like there are certain okay, we had season 1, season 3, season 4. You're not going to get season 2. We'll reign over at some point, but not right now.
Exactly.
While we're on,
a lot of the old stuff as well hasn't migrated.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Right. While we're on the topic of Crunchyroll, before we get into our main focus for this episode, can we just address how Crunchyroll divides up its different languages into seasons? Personally, that's not the greatest UI for a streaming company. What I would have liked to seen, even though Funimation's app wasn't always great, you could choose, pretty effortlessly if you wanted English, Spanish, whatever, language they had available. But I don't want to see a season so I geek out, say, oh, there's another season. Hey, psych, it's just a Portuguese dub.
Yeah, so frustrating.
Yeah, and that's been a big consensus for a long time of people who have used Crunchyroll. Anybody who subscribes to the Reddit community and just all their comments on the website. But hopefully, that is something that's going to be coming down the line.
I think they might be experimenting with a different thing, because it seems that every time in the last couple of weeks that I log in to watch Licorice Recoil, it's in Spanish. And I'm in the correct season. So I think it's because we share an account as writers, and I think one of our other writers is watching in Spanish. So I keep getting it in Spanish, even though I'm in this is for subtitles though, so maybe that's different.
Right.
Yeah.
I know, and again, this is the last thing I'll say that because I don't want to dwell too much about it. For those who use Google Chrome as a web browser, apparently there is an extension that you can download that's free that will integrate with the desktop version of Crunchyroll so that you don't see seasons anymore. You can actually pick the audio language that you desire. And like, well,
Which is
gosh,
pretty
they
cool.
need to call this guy and make this official.
Hire him.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
apparently apparently the person you have there right now ain't doing it. All right. But we want to get down to our series that we'll be talking today. So Claire, what is the series that we be that we will be discussing today?
Yeah, so the full name is Puella Magi Madoka Magica. Most often it's just called like Madoka or Madoka Magica. And it was a huge hit back in 2011 in the spring. And then had a sequel movie come out a couple of years later. And we are now on tenterhooks awaiting the final installment, which will be coming out at some point, I think, in this coming year. And it's kind of, it was the turning point, I would say, in magical girl anime, which is its whole own genre. And it's known as the first of the dark magical girl series. And it really kind of, I think, shocked a lot of people and just blew a lot of minds when it came out. Because, you know, as you could see from the opening credit, is just like a standard magical girl, really poppy, very pink, very cutesy. And then by episode 3, you're like, no, this is not my Sailor Moon.
Yeah, it really
Yeah,
sets you up for
definitely
like
not.
you know, it gives you false security when you when you hear this. You know, it's very poppy, happy, and then you just turn the corner at episode 3, say, hey, surprise, it's not what we thought it was.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Quite dark actually, when you really get
it's
into it.
very dark. Yeah. Well, the author, Gen Urobuchi, is known on the internet as Uro Butcher, you know, because it is so brutal, and he's known for this, his writing.
Ah, interesting.
Is that the same person who did, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's another, I don't think it's like Magical Girl, or maybe it is. It's a series translated into English. It's called When They Cry. It's like a,
Higurashi.
yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure who wrote that, actually. It's a good question.
Yeah, I know that's a very graphic anime. So they have a weak stomach. Yeah. But so Claire, why? And I'll just shorten to Madoka. Why Madoka? Why this series?
Yeah, why did I pick it for this? I think one of the major reasons is it was such an important series for Beneath the Tangles, as it came out about 6 months into the forming of the ministry. And now I wasn't there, of course, but Charles tells the story, you know, that he's kind of thinking, you know, is this going to float? Can we actually convince people, readers, that, you know, that this is a worthwhile endeavor? And then Madoka Magica comes out with all kinds of like Christ-like parallels happening here, but you know, with its core question really being a question about salvation. Can magical girls be saved from the curse? You know, and Homura says very clearly, no, this is impossible. And Madoka, you know, refuses to accept that answer. You know, and then we see her growing and developing, and then sort of, you know, the climax being this very messianic sort of gesture, you know, this messianic wish that she makes. And so it really just set, you know, the anti-blogger world abuzz. And particularly a lot of Christians, I think, sort of came out from underneath their little rocks of kind of feeling like, can I like anime? Can I watch this? Is this, you know, is this separate from my faith? Or is this a guilty pleasure? Like, what is this? And to see, you know, these questions about salvation, this demonstration of grace on the screen, you know, I think was just a real sort of exciting moment for a lot of Christians who enjoy anime, because it's like, oh wow, actually there is something here that we can engage with, that we can talk about, that we can actually, you know, can speak to our faith, and that our faith can speak to as well. So I wanted to kind of talk about it as this kind of, in a sense, you know, this real kind of foundational, you know, series for Christian otaku. but also just because it was what kind of confirmed for me, okay, I'm going to sit and stay in this little corner of the world, which is anime, for a while, because just visually it blew my mind, thematically, and then just it wasn't actually the kind of messianic line and Madoka's wish that really spoke powerfully to me, but several other things that I really felt, sort of God opening my eyes to, and meeting me in. And I'm sure we'll tease all of that out as we go. So it's just such a rich series, just artistically, creatively, but also in terms of faith.
Yeah, it is definitely a very interesting artistic choice of style that they had, because you have the sort of classic anime visuals of the magical girls and all of that, and then when they go into the labyrinths and into I think, yeah, it's a witch's labyrinth, and the style is completely different. It's this like
Yeah,
almost like
it's
punk rock kind of
yeah,
visuals you got going on,
right. A
sort of
lot of
collage, pasting together.
abstracts and yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah. That's one thing that kind of like threw me for a loop. I'm like, wait, this isn't the typical style. It's like somebody just pasted a whole bunch of pictures together.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the studio that does it is actually quite well. They have a very well-known series, a very complex series, the Monogatari series. And I haven't watched a great deal of it, but it's known for having this very kind of experimental and creative engagement with different styles of visual art, even some live action as well, all built into there. So this whole studio has always been sort of keen to explode our expectations of what Japanese animation is actually all about.
So interesting. So, in your opinion, why do you think they chose to make that stylized difference in the labyrinths for the witches' labyrinths?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'm sure that, there is probably some interview material out there, and I should have done some better research before coming on. But I would say I think it is shocking, and I think it is our first kind of foreshadow that things are not what they seem. That this series is not going to be what we think it's going to be. But also, so there are runes in there, and there's a lot of also German in there, a lot of kind of Gothic influence as well. And so I think this is kind of speaking to some of the lore that this is trying to pull on as well. So in a sense, it really is like literally saying, this world of the witches is unlike our reality. That this is a whole different set of rules here that are at play, and you kind of feel that viscerally. With the kind of the shocking difference in the animation style.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think too, thinking about how we were describing the visuals of the like collage, as we find out later in the series, spoilers, guys, that the magical girls actually become the witches. So they had lives before becoming a witch, and some of that visual representation of them as a witch comes into the collage of their life now as a magical girl, comes into them being a witch. And I think you can see some of the influences there, because I think, oh my gosh, one of them became a witch, like that we knew intimately about their lives. Oh, it was what's her name?
Sayaka.
Yes, thank you. Yes. Yeah, she and we see all of these musical elements because her wish was for her friend who was a violinist or violist. And I just thought that's really interesting that there was like a mashing of life things in there.
Absolutely. And it really picks up on, I think, sort of the nature of a curse, right? That a curse isn't just something completely alien to your life. It's this kind of a perversion and a contamination of even, their greatest wish, really. And so we see that. And so all the characters, they're not animated smoothly in those bits. They're all kind of janky.
Yeah.
They feel very two-dimensional, and you can see visually the influence of the curse on their world, and this is now their lens for reality is all contorted and twisted.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, I feel satisfied with that explanation. Talking it out was like, okay, I think I do understand that now.
And while we're on the topic of curses, so how these Earth girls become magical girls
Mhm.
is by what I would describe as like a cat-like figure in the one that we see, Kibe. And looks really cute, harmless, and so yeah, I'll grant you whatever wish, and in return you'll be a magical girl. But it is literally making a deal with the devil,
Yeah.
because you are giving up. You have no idea the cost of what you're doing. And Sayaka, yeah, she makes a selfish wish, but that doesn't matter. Like she's still
Mhm.
like giving up something that's, very vital. So
Well, it's giving up her soul.
yeah,
Her soul literally like detaches from her body, and
right.
it's now in this little, I don't know, whatever they're called, little vial, that's your soul. I remember, was it towards the end of the series, where I think it was Madoka picked up the little thing, whatever it's called, and she throws it, and Kyubey was like, "What? Do you care so little for your friend?" And she was like, "What are you talking about?" He was like, "That was her. You just threw her off," and her body just like goes limp. And so it's like, oh my gosh, like they
Yeah,
literally,
like you're no longer
wow,
like human. That's just a
right.
shell. Like as long as that vial is like near to them, it just uses them as a outward source.
Hmm.
Yeah. And that's it, is they don't know going into this, right? That that is
Right.
Right.
actually, that they're signing on a dotted line. They're buying into, what up until now the magical girl genre has always said, which is, well, this is a free wish. In exchange, you fight for the right thing. You be a hero. Like that's the cost, right? Is you become a hero. You become a magical girl. And they don't understand, the real cost. Because I think what's going on, in addition to the kind of deal with the devil type of parallel, this is really, in a way, this might sound a bit harsh, but they are trying to play God,
Yeah.
because they're all trying to make something happen in their own power, through this wish. And that really kind of brings us back to kind of like, the Garden of Eden, and the fact that Adam and Eve didn't really fully understand what it was they were doing, but they were kind of trying to play God, and that there were these untold consequences to that. But what's, I think, also really interesting is that Madoka does know the consequences. She does know what she's signing up for when she makes her wish. And in that
Yes.
sense, I think she's very Christ-like, because if we're honest, it's only really God himself who knows the full cost of, separation from God. So it's really only Jesus who went, who has made that sacrifice, that is equivalent to, to what Madoka does, of going into it, knowing what you're doing and knowing the cost that it is going to entail, and yet, for the joy that was set before him, thinking little of that cost, he gave his life on the cross.
Yeah. Yeah. It was something that he obviously we see in the Garden of Gethsemane. Um, he didn't really want to feel the pain. He didn't want to go through that, but he was agonized over it, but he knew what the cost would be if he didn't. And that was greater and more important. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's and yeah, and Madoka, you're right, she did know. She knew what she was signing up for. She knew that she'd be selling her soul. And but she was like, no one should have to go through this. No one should. And so that's why she made the choice that she did. So yeah, I definitely think she's a very Christ-like figure as we get to the end and see her choice.
Yeah, and going along with that, there are, as Claire said earlier, there are so many like parallels you can um, get from Nautica. Not only like her kind of like messianic type of gesture at the end, but just all the other characters that like come to play. Um, we see one there, the latent view of like the church with Kyoko. I think.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the red haired who's always eating the Pocky sticks.
Or an apple for that
Yeah.
matter, which is also
And
very symbolic, I think.
right. And her wish was, well, her father was a preacher, and he just wanted to like share the good news and preach about different things, and people didn't like that. So her wish was that uh, people would just listen to her dad.
Yeah. Because she loved him and
Yeah.
she wanted to help him, and it turned very bad in the end.
Yes.
Did not go
Unfortunately.
well. Um, yeah, it's interesting. We were talking just before we jumped on here about Kyoko, and she's a pretty typical PK, I think.
Yeah.
And that you kind of either go stereotypically, I will say, you either go, um, full on missionary, continue to be a pastor yourself or in ministry some way, and then, or you just go completely opposite and deny everything, become a rebel, drugs, alcohol, the whole thing. So you could go two different ways. What's interesting is that you yourself are a pastor's kid. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, and
Definitely
you
lots to
seem
resonate with.
yeah, yes, yeah, lots to resonate with. So you're in ministry, I guess, but you're not fully over on one side. But yeah. So what was that like for you? Like resonating with this character?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, because there is something I think as a child too, is you have this instinct to protect your parents, even though you know that it's the other way around. Parents protect their children, but
Yeah.
still, I think often when especially when you're the oldest or the only, and your eyes start to be open to the fact that your parents are human too, and that they're vulnerable as well, and that they have bad days, and sometimes they're treated very poorly. And those kinds of things, when you see them within the church, it's more shocking, and it hurts you more because it kind of shatters that bit of naivete of, but we all love God, we all love Jesus. How can you be treating my father this way, my pastor this way, my mother this way, these kinds of things, and there is a kind of a disillusionment that happens, and or that can happen. And I think we see that with Kyoko, that she, in a sense, unfortunately for her, I think the disillusionment comes from her father's own rejection of her. She doesn't realize that he won't see her actions as being part of his same faith, and I think that really triggers her kind of rejection then of kind of any kind of responsibility or caring for anyone or trying to really protect anyone, and she shifts that then all onto herself.
Yeah, it's a very extreme way of responding, which we so often do, right? We're rejected, we're whatever it is, and then we go completely the other way of like, well, I can't let anyone in then because I'm afraid of that rejection. And um, yeah, I was just watching. Actually, I'm going through. Do you remember the book Captivating? By Stacey Eldridge. Yeah, it came out
Yeah.
a while ago, but on the YouVersion Bible app, there's a 6-day course that you can go through, like a Bible study. And so they've got these video things that go through it. And the one today was about fallen Eve. And what does fallen Eve do? What does she look like now that we've fallen? And one of the things was that like we can go one of two ways. I fall into more this category of um, wanting to control your environment by um, keeping people out and by staying behind the scenes. They were talking about she's the woman who is always in the kitchen at functions, at parties, at all of this because not out of a servant's heart, but because she doesn't want anyone to see the real her and to care because then the rejection would be too hard. And it kind of seems like that's something that Kyoko is going through here is that she puts on that prickly front because she doesn't want people to get in to see the real her, because that's scary and because she might be rejected again. And it's hard. It's hard to let people in and to be vulnerable. Um, it's difficult.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really great insight, and it sort of helps to explain why she spends so many days, you know, for lack of a more delicate way of putting it, sort of just tending Sayaka's dead body, you know, trying to keep the hope that maybe this girl who she was starting to become friends with, you know, that still a chance for her to live again so that they can actually become proper friends. You know, it's incredibly tragic.
It is. Ugh, the whole series really is, you know. I
It's
mean,
true,
there's a
it's
happy
true.
ending with Madoka, but even that is like, whew, it's rough.
Yeah, it's true, it's true.
And get into let's go ahead and discuss the character of Honora a little bit. Now, when we first start in the series, Honora is the new girl. Madoka wants to befriend, and Sayaka and Madoka learn that she's a magical girl, and she's like tough and all this stuff.
Yeah,
But as we get further into the series, Honora wasn't always that way. Time and time again, no pun intended, because she has the ability to reverse time. Um, her mission is to save Madoka from making the choice to become a magical girl. And even in the first instance, like, hey, if you value yourself, your family, you won't pursue this deal with Kibe.
Which is good advice, you know, um, except that she does end up sort of becoming the savior of magical girls in a way. But
Yeah,
yeah,
kind of like
don't sell your soul. Don't do
yeah,
that. That's bad.
kind of like a role reversal because we think Honora is kind of the hero, but then it kind of flips, 180, and Madoka is actually the hero.
Well, I think at first though, we were meant to not really like Homura
Well, yeah, because
because
how
it's
she's
like,
presented,
okay,
yeah.
why are you just coming at this? Like, don't do it, don't do it. And yeah, she's very she's not mean about it, but she's very
Just
firm
straightforward,
and
yeah.
forceful about it, and it
One,
doesn't come across all that great.
one of my
yeah,
favorite phrases when somebody has been angry with somebody, or um, is just gonna tell somebody a piece of their mind. I was a quick aside. I was substituting, which is a very short career, like only a few months, substitute teaching, and I was substituting for a gym class, and it happened to be the week that they were doing the effects of drugs and alcohol. So they give the kids the drunk goggles and
Oh.
try to like direct them and kind of like simulate what being inebriated kind of feels like. One of the um directions that they said, okay, now when you take the goggles off, don't throw them down because these are pretty expensive. And we had one guy do this one time, and Officer Ryan, do you want to tell what happened? It's like, well, it was hard, but I prayed with him fervently. I which was code for he got chewed out. But yeah, um, with Homura, we learn kind of like more about her character in Rebellion 3. For listeners who want kind of like I guess a upgraded animation, different type of musical soundtrack for the series, there's actually 3 movies that kind of you can watch half the series in movie 1, the other half in movie 2, and then there is a third movie that some people aren't sure where it fits into the timeline. Me personally, I think it kind of fits around episode 12, which is the last episode in the series. So, Claire, with Rebellion, what are your general thoughts as far as like what is that adding to the series that we may not have gotten previously?
it's a great question. I think what Rebellion shows us is the consequences of Monica's wish, because after she makes the wish, and it sounds like this is simply grace kind of invading a karmic system, right? And we're going to finally just scrap this whole oppressive, exploitative system of wishes and curses, right? But that's not actually what happens. And we're warned about this in episode 12, in the conversation between Madoka and Mami, where Mami says, you do realize that you're going to turn into a concept. You're going to lose your personhood, and you will simply become a new law. And so this is then the world that we get to see in Rebellion. And then there's also the Magia side story as well, which is a 3-season kind of spin-off series that also exists in this reality where Madoka has become the law of cycles. So a new kind of logic to how the whole system works. But the system is still there, right? Of prices and cost for becoming a magical girl. Exploitation by the incubators, they're still there. And so we're kind of seeing what that looks like, and Homura's realization that actually, she's gradually remembering that Madoka existed, that Madoka was her friend, and starting to put the pieces together that the incubators are not yet done with Madoka, and that they're going to try to twist this new system the same way that they did the original karmic system. So we're kind of left with this really ambiguous end. I'm not sure if you saw, there's like a very short after credit scene in Rebellion, and it's so open to interpretation, because we see Kyubey has been beaten to a pulp by a dancing Homura, and then she falls off the edge of a cliff. And then we have runes which pop up, and apparently the runes say, in German, who is dreaming? So it's like, that's the end? What? So this is why we need, another installment to find out, okay, can we actually fully get rid of this system of checks and balances? Is there room in this world that Urabochi has created for actual genuine grace to come? Or are we going to be stuck in the kind of more Buddhist-inspired kind of karmic reality? Can magical girls be saved or not?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. That does seem like it needs an answer of, can the system change? Thankfully we have our answer for humans, and that yes, the system can be changed, and we can be saved, which is awesome.
Which is why, like initially when I saw Rebellion, I was devastated because Homura was my favorite character, and I was like, what just happened? But through a sleepless night, and I literally was saying, what's going on? Like, what do you think of this? Like, what do you have to say about it? And I realized, oh my goodness, Homura represents humanity, because she wasn't satisfied with a distant concept of salvation. She wasn't satisfied with a system where there was no personal relationship. What she wanted above all was a personal savior, and that she would go as far as, to her knowledge, becoming a devil in order to rip apart the system that didn't allow her to have personal relationship. So I just felt like, wow, that there is a lot of seeking going on in this film. And I think this speaks largely, much more broadly to what is happening in Japanese culture right now with the interest in spirituality, but also this kind of dissatisfaction with the answers that Buddhism and Shinto has provided, but also this wariness of Christianity, and just this continual striving to find, is there a greater purpose? Is there such a thing as a loving God, as a savior, or is it up to us to be the hero? Is it up to us to kind of make it happen? Is the best that we can hope for a kind of balancing out, or is there something better? Is there something more? Is there something relational, and healing and personal that is available?
Yeah, that's such a great insight into all of that. And it's that, we do long for a personal relationship, and that's just built into each and every one of us. And I hope the people who are asking those questions find the answer, the right answer. But yeah, I hope they find the answer, because it is important.
Yeah, with all the seeking that's going on, like not only abroad but here in America, um, again, there's just this sense that I'm getting that people aren't satisfied with the quote unquote status quo, the things that they've been given as answers. So I think that's great that people are searching, and we pray and hope that they are looking to the only thing that can satisfy the true one answer of truth.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
With Nautica, one thing that and it's a very short little type of scene in Rebellion I did not understand at all. Is when they are in when they're in the kind of like realm labyrinth, being the witch. This like platform rises and table, and they're all sitting around, and they sing a song about a
Oh.
cake. And like, okay, what is going on? Do you have any explanation for that?
I believe it was the original closing sequence to the television series, was that they were all around a table eating a cake. So I think it's a sort of a citation back to the original series. But when you watch on Netflix, right, it just fast forwards through the closing credits. So you don't see that. But I believe the second half, maybe it was, of the original series had basically had that similar scene.
Okay, yeah, because I was just kind of like, okay, what's yeah.
It was very interesting. Well,
Yeah.
it's like they were, because they were singing a little song about, is it a pear or something? No, it's a cake. And you're like, what? Okay, it's very strange. What is happening?
That'd be a great one. I'm sure that like if you ask the Madoka forum, that there'll be all kinds of like really in-depth, like intricate analyses that will just blow your mind, because once you start diving into the fandom for this series, like it is mind-blowing the amount of care and attention to detail that went into this. That the whole rune system, like this is an actual language that they created, like visual language, a new alphabet. And Urobuchi didn't expect people to crack it as quickly as they did, but the fans like cracked it very, very quickly. And apparently it was this huge kind of global effort where people from all over the world were like, connecting through the forums and managed to actually decipher this. And when you do, it adds a whole other layer to the series. And I'll admit I haven't actually gone through all of the translations of the runes, but if you wanted, you could dedicate many, many hours of your life to just delving deep into all of the layers of meaning in this series, for sure.
Yeah, don't underestimate the fandom.
Yes, as I was just about to say.
Yeah,
because
they will
they
get
are
into it.
very very diligent. They will pour hours and hours, and some fandoms, some fan bases, communities you want to stay away from. Looking at you, My Hero Academia. I don't know what you guys are doing, but I don't want any part of it. Love the show. I don't particularly like some of your fan base. But yeah, like that's so crazy that I don't think I would, but just get into like these just heated debates on like what I would um describe as like frivolous like details.
Yes.
Now there is stuff I'm very passionate about with the series, but okay, going back to My Hero Academia for a moment, like the shipping of like some characters and like some people very strong beliefs about that. And if you don't agree with them, you're just like the worst person ever.
Which ultimately, like, does it matter?
Yeah.
No.
These
doesn't.
are two-dimensional characters. You don't have any influence over them. So
It's really good.
gosh.
I think it's a really good reminder for us too, because it's when you're not a part of it, you look at it and you think, how silly. And yet we do this in the church so often and so passionately and so righteously, like so self-righteously, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it kind of like, it could be like, it could really shine a spotlight on you, sort of seeing what's happening in the fandoms, and you realize, oh my gosh, but I think maybe I'm a little obsessive about, like the way that hymns are done, or what kind of music is used, or, how long the sort of, all these different little things that actually are, they're just dogma, right? These are not the heart of God. This is not the heart of God we're talking about, or his nature. This is just like performativity, really, and yet, yeah, we get so passionate and so heated and so offended at one another.
Yeah, I
it's
think
true.
one of the quotes from that I heard from the pastor that would illustrate this is when like people get so, oh, I don't like the music, I don't like the message, blah blah blah. Where a church member went into the pastor and said, yeah, I don't really like the worship today. And the pastor says, that's okay, we weren't worshiping you. So
True though.
kind of, yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think that's one of the beautiful things too about anime, about something, about broadening our kind of our circle and our cultural reference, is that so often God will then like catch us by surprise, and be like, huh, so you're judging this little dynamic here, but isn't that exactly what you do over here in my house? And it's just, this is one of the things I love about watching anime, is so often I think, oh, I'm just enjoying, I'm just relaxing. And then God will really call me up on something, and I'll realize, oh my gosh, I am actually behaving like this character, or I have thought that way, or or I want this character to be punished or to learn a lesson, and instead grace is extended to them, and then I'm like, oh, wait a second. Yeah, teachable moment.
Yeah, there's a lot of those teachable moments, I think, in anime, and really in movies and TV shows in general. The visual stories are so captivating because of that, I think.
Absolutely, because it takes you out of the place where you're just concentrating on your own life, and then what happens is it allows God to speak to you sort of like allegorically, just like how the parables did, right? So in a sense, they function very often, or they can function like parables.
Yes.
For us. So it's really cool how Jesus is still telling us parables. Really cool.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the main reasons that we love, watching like movies, especially animation, is because like Jesus often spoke in parables and stories, and we just love the art of storytelling, and especially in anime, just because so much detail and thought and care goes into it that you can really appreciate that you don't really get with many other art forms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think, and there's something beautiful too. It helps you to really connect with God's communication style, like with his where it's heart first. He's not a didactic communicator. Like Jesus was telling stories because they're also, even for those who weren't in a place where they could fully understand it, it was an interesting story. It's something that will stick and maybe will percolate, maybe for years, until they're in a place where they can actually get that golden nugget from it. And I think there's such a kindness that we can see about God, that he uses stories, that he uses anime, he uses animation, he uses television and film and popular music to speak to us, because it's like it's a safe place, right? It's a comfortable place. It's something that we love and we enjoy. And he meets us there, instead of saying, no, you must come over here and I shall speak to thee in these and thous, and you shall learn my language. He says, no, I'm going to speak your language. I'm going to speak the language of animation. I'm going to speak the language of beauty, and I'm going to gently but firmly, call you up to a higher place as you do it.
Yeah. Well said. Well said.
And we know that both you and Charles have written on Madoka. So if you all want to check that out, there are great articles I've written myself. Really gives some good insight into the series. One question I did have about with Beneath the Tangles, I know that it seems like way back when now, that Beneath the Tangles used to have a podcast called the Tanglecast. Have you heard anything about that coming back?
Yes.
Oh.
very exciting news. Just this week, in fact, we have three new staff members have joined us, and they are doing the groundwork to get the Tangle cast up and running again. Not sure yet. We're still at the brainstorming stage as to what exact form it will take. I guess it's taken quite a few different forms over the years, but yes, that is going to be back in the podcast verse, hopefully within a month or so. But we'll see. Don't quote me on that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's definitely something to look forward to because I always enjoyed listening to it. And when it went on, like, the hiatus that it's been on, I was like, oh man, because it's been really, it's just like, what we do is just people talking about what they enjoy and making, correlations to that. So yeah, so really exciting news.
Yeah, I think one of the first ones we listened to together, Josh, was about oh my gosh, all I can think of is Death Note. It's not Death. Oh, Death Parade.
Oh, yes.
That was one of the first ones we listened to, and I think it was
Which
because
also, for those of you listening, also a very deceptive opening.
oh yes, it's such a happy, fun, jazzy
Yeah,
opening,
they're all doing the can in one scene, and
and that it's not
yeah,
a yeah. But I think that was such an interesting podcast. So that's awesome. I'm excited to see that come back. I'm sure others are as well.
Yeah, no, I can't wait because this will be new since I've joined the team. So I feel like I'm part of a new era here. Has not yet known the Tangles cast.
wonderful. Well, Claire, we have enjoyed so much talking with you. Again, our honestly getting to know you a little bit better, talking about Nautica. Again, there are so many things that we could pick out. If we had more time, we'd be here all day. But Claire, if people want to follow you, keep up with what you're doing, how can they find you?
Yeah, so I'd say I would direct folks to Beneath the Tangles. So we've got our website at beneath-the-tangles.com, but we're also on like pretty much every social media platform, Tumblr. We're now back on TikTok again, and of course Instagram and Twitter, and then also SoundCloud with the Doki Doki News, which has just come back as well. So yeah, just come and check us out on whatever sort of platform is your jam. We are there, engaging with folks. We love to follow back as well, so just hit us up, leave comments, get in touch. And if for any writers out there, if you're interested in writing, we are always looking for sort of pitches, and you can submit pitches through our website. And then you would most likely be working with me on the editor at the moment for the kind of content development for the website. So yeah, come along. And I don't really do social media myself, so that's why I'll shine the limelight onto the ministry as a whole.
That's wonderful, perfect. And if you want to check out the video version of this podcast, then you can hop over onto our YouTube, and we look forward to what Beneath the Tangles has lined up in the future. Again, great ministry bridging that gap between Christianity and anime. And until next time, everybody, keep those halos shiny and stay holy, my friends.
Thank you for listening to the Annaluia podcast. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to keep up with all the latest information. We would love to hear your comments and questions about today's episode, as well as suggestions for future episodes. You can message us on our socials or email us at contact@annaluia.com.
All right, and that is a wrap.